A conversation with Rod Diridon Sr. From Steam to High Speed. With Kelly Perasso and Shea MacDonald. Italifornian interns and Santa Clara University Italian Studies students.
We are recording. And I can start off with the first question here. So can you share some stories from your childhood and how your Italian American heritage played a role in your upbringing?
Well, maybe I should just give you a short synopsis of that period of time so that you know what occurred. Um, my father is the Italian side of me, and he was born in Albany here in the Bay Area. His parents came here in 1889 or 90, something like that. And his father and four brothers and two sisters settled on the peninsula and in the area. They all started businesses. They all became wealthy. And as did my grandmother on the Italian side was in that period of time too. My grandfather's name was Fortunato. My grandmother's name was Onorina, and their last name was Diridoni, just an I on the end of my name, but it was pronounced Diridoni. And as you know, in Latin, Diridoni means direction giver. Diri is direction, giver is doni. And I didn't realize that, but it's kind of fortuitous. My dad was born in 1912 or 13, I can't remember which, and he was the first son of the generation, and our very Catholic family had the policy that the first son of a generation became the priest. They gave the first son to God. And so the family celebrated when he was born. And pardon me clearing my voice, but I have one vocal cord and it doesn't work very well. So I have to cough at you now and then. I apologize. At any rate, he was born in 1912, 13, something like that. And then they moved back to Italy in about 2025 to take him to preschool. And by that time, they had become wealthy people, and he began by cleaning buildings, and then pretty soon he was renting buildings, and pretty soon he was owning buildings. And in the 20-year period of time he was here, 20 some odd years, he became wealthy in our standards, and Italian standards, he became very wealthy. And so he took his money back to Tuscany, which is where my grandmother was from. She was Onorina Giacomelli, and Giacomelli is a elite family from Florence that worked with the Medici. In fact, we have a seal that the Medici gave one of our relatives, declaring them to be nobility, and indeed they became field marshals in the Medici military and are buried in the Medici tomb in Florence. Wow. And so it's on the one hand, my grandmother was powerful Tuscan leaders. My grandfather's side were from Sicily, but they were brought into Pisa, which is the town near where they settled, and became nobility because of the money and because of grandma. And they settled in a town called Torre del Lago, which is the hometown of Puccini. And they bought a beautiful home on 7 acres and a vineyard and so on, near Lake Mazzuccolo, which was about 3 blocks from Puccini's home. And they bought a villa in Pisa and a villa on the coast of Viareggio, the Italian Riviera. And so they went from being ragtag immigrants to America to coming back and being among the elite in Tuscany in a period of less than 40 years. And so Dad went to preschool when the hormones began to kick in his puberty time, he wasn't going to become a priest. He was a big, good-looking kid, and he didn't. The lady started chasing him, and he didn't run from them. And I got a note from the priest one day that Grandma showed me that said, "Your son is not priest material." And so the family went into crisis. They all cried because he couldn't become a priest. He was sent to mechanic school then, even though he was a really bright guy. Chrysler was running mechanic school all over the world for their cars. And so he went to mechanic school. And then a couple of years later, in the late 30s, he was sent back to America because Mussolini was coming to power, and they didn't want him to lose his American citizenship by being drafted by Mussolini. And so he was sent back, and he began to work with the four brothers that stayed here. And then was, because he flirted too much with the girls, I think, he was sent to a cattle ranch near Eureka on the northern border of California. And he learned to speak English, and he learned some manners on the cattle ranch. Worked for the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is kind of like a home Peace Corps during the end of the downturn period of the end of the Roosevelt administration, and he was working in the area of Dunsmuir. Actually, he was head of the carpool because he knew the mechanic stuff, and he ran into my mother, who was visiting the area. She was being schooled to become a operatic singer and piano player, and she fell in love with this big, good-looking Italian, and they decided to make babies, and so they settled in Dunsmuir, and that's where I grew up. Dunsmuir was a division center of the railroad, a very low-income town. Everybody worked for the railroad, and didn't make a whole lot of money, but you had enough to feed your family, and that's what I grew up in. As soon as I could work, I was working, and I worked first cleaning bricks, chipping the cement off bricks, and then I worked in a gas station during my high school time, and then when I went away to college, I'm dyslexic, and so they had to teach me how to learn in a peculiar kind of way. But when I started learning, I really did start learning, and I found that I was pretty bright. And so I got 99+% on the SAT. And so instead of me being a railroader, I had to go to college. I wanted to become a railroader. That wasn't very fair. So I went off to college, and then I worked summers and vacations back on the railroad. Was a brakeman and a fireman, and every time that I had a break, I made sure that I didn't have classes on Friday, so I could take off on Friday morning and be up there and take a train out on Friday evening, and tried to get back then on Monday to go to school again. And I did that for 7 years, through a bachelor's in accounting and a master's in management, MB, Master of Science in Business Administration, MBA, MSBA. And then you've seen my history, so you know the rest. Did I send you a copy of my history?
No, you did not, but I was able to find a lot of what
Okay.
was online. I mean, I don't know if there's anything on there that
Okay.
wouldn't be
I
online.
think with that background, let me answer your question now.
Yeah.
Which was, say it again.
The question was, can you share some stories from your childhood, which you kind of did, and how your Italian American heritage played a role in your upbringing?
Well, I can tell you that my dad was traditional male Italian. He was macho. He was big and good looking, too good looking for his own good in some cases, and and he worked very, very hard. I can never remember a time that he didn't have 3 jobs. He would work on the railroad. He'd come home and he'd sweep out the local grocery store, and then he would cut wood for the neighborhood. And he didn't talk much. I can't remember him reaching down to ever hug me. I don't think he ever told me that well, at the very end of his life, he told me that he loved me. But he showed me how to live a life of productivity by the way he did it. And he used every minute that he had to work hard for his family. And that was flat out it. And you better not threaten his family because you were going to get in trouble with this big tagger. And uh, at the same time, I began to realize in growing up that being a macho Italian male was not appropriate. And the thing that made me realize that most was when the Catholic priest in the area, who was a little Irish Catholic guy, who looked down on Italians, by the way. The Italians were the intruders into the society in Dunsmuir. They were taking the jobs away from the other guys, like you see the immigrants nowadays. And so Dad would go to church and give as much money as he could, which wasn't very much. And then the little priest would come over to our house and scream bloody murder at Dad. You got to give more money to the church. You're going to go to hell. Well, I was about 4 years old, and the little priest came over on one of these mornings, and Dad had a terrible temper, by the way. On one of these mornings, Dad had just gotten back from working all night on the railroad. He was sitting there at the table with his head down on the table. The priest was screaming at him. He lost his temper. He stood up, grabbed the priest, threw him through the screen door without opening the screen door first, came off the hinges, and the door and the priest landed in the patio. And the
Wow.
little priest screamed at him, "You're excommunicated. You're no longer a Catholic. Don't ever come back to the church." And so Dad said, "So be it." And then my mother explained that, you see, this is why I would rather not be a Catholic. She was an Episcopalian, by the way. And see, this is why I would rather not be a Catholic. Women and and uh, and anything subservient were there to serve the church and the priest. Most churches, and in my way of thinking, my mother told me, and she was a real civil rights advocate, it should be to be serving society. And so she said, now we're going to become Episcopalians. If your dad wants to say the Catholic creed, it's exactly the same. And Episcopal and Catholic Church are exactly the same, except that women are equal. They can become priests and they can become deacons and so on and so on. So that's where I grew up, very comfortably and under the control of a radical civil rights advocate. And so I became a civil rights advocate.
Wow. That's an amazing story about your dad and the priest.
Well, he never went back to the Catholic Church except when he got word that grandmother had died. And then we went back to the church, lit a candle. He cried, the only time I ever saw my father cry. And we left the church and have never been back.
Wow. And going off of that, were there other instances growing up where you felt isolated as a Italian American? Did you speak Italian in the house, or did your father kind of want to suppress that part of his
My
heritage?
father radically wanted to suppress it.
Okay.
My mother encouraged him to teach us to speak Italian because Italian is the root language for all of the Romance languages, Latin and Italian. And so it's the root for Spanish and French and all around, Portuguese and all around. And but Dad would not hear of it. When Mom would talk, she could speak a little Italian, but Mom would try to teach me a little bit. He would interrupt and tell her not to do that. And the reason was because he was so sensitive to being prejudiced against when he was first back in America because of his inability to speak clear English. And by the way, when he did start speaking English, it was precise. It was real precise English. He was
Mhm.
taught by an English teacher who worked on the cattle ranch where he was working.
Did you keep any other traditions or customs from Italy in within your household?
I think the tradition that my mother kept alive was loving each other. She was very demonstrative. You get within 10 feet of her and you were going to get hugged. And she would hug us and tell us that she loved us and so on. And when Dad didn't show much uh, a demonstration like that, she would remind us, he loves you. Don't worry, he loves you. And he acted like he did. When there was something to be done, he was very thoughtful and would work very hard to make sure that we had whatever advantage he could bring and whatever demonstration of affection he could afford to share.
Well, yeah, those are great stories. Thank you for sharing. Another question I had for you was, how has your heritage influenced your philanthropic efforts, particularly in supporting education and community organizations?
Well, I grew up knowing that I was primarily Italian. There was a strong Italian community in Dunsmuir, although it was considered the lower end of the economic spectrum, along with the Mexican Americans who were maintaining the Dracs and the Irish who were new arrivals also. I realized I was Italian, and a lot of the other kids in school with me had names that ended in I and O and were Italian. And so we had a cadre, and we got together and we supported each other for this, that, and the other thing. We had a football team, the number one football team in the state for several years, because the biggest people had to run the railroads. Little people couldn't run those big old steam engines and so on. So the great big people came there and they had great big kids, and we had a really good football team, even though we were a small school. So we had the number one team and won the state championship for small schools year after year. And there were a lot of Italian names on that football team. And so I began to be proud of being Italian. And I went off to college, and then being Italian became unique and kind of cool, because other people who were Italian stuck together. We had a kind of a cadre. And so when we ran for office, I ran for junior and senior class president and student body officer and graduate representative on the city student council at San Jose State. And that began my political activities. And I think it helped to be able to say, my name's Diridon, but I'm Italian. And I did at every speech. And then what really crystallized it, when I came back from the military and got into politics, I ran for office on the county board of supervisors. And I don't know whether you know it, but in California, in the big counties, the supervisors are the most powerful political people. They have the biggest districts. They have the most money to be in charge of. They have the most direct services because they're spending all of the state and federal money that comes to the area, and they have the largest staff, personal staff, so they can get out and really do a lot for their constituents. So here we were, 5 members of the Board of Supervisors in a great big county that is now Silicon Valley, and we had this ability to do great good. I was assigned transportation and parks as my responsibility for my 20 years on the county board, and I was spending money buying parks and building a transportation system and being very proud of it. So that in 1976, when we had the bicentennial for the nation, I became chair of the County Bicentennial Commission. And as the chair of the Bicentennial Commission, I helped found the Italian American Heritage Foundation, which continues to this day as the primary Italian American organization in the region.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there at all of the activities, spoke at their Italian American days, in fact, chaired the annual celebration of the Italian Independence Day on June 6th. and chaired it for 12 years, and was very proud of being the Italian liaison on the County Board of Supervisors. So I think I'm still known as the Italian supervisor.
Hmm. So you really saw a shift in society of like this acceptance of Italian Americans.
Absolutely, not only acceptance, but in our valley,
Hmm.
where Italians settled en masse during the agricultural time,
Hmm.
in our valley, uh, being Italian helped you dramatically, politically. Still, even now, at the waning end of that influence, our state senator is David Cortese. Our past mayor is Sam Liccardo, and so on and so on. Uh, Office after office after office that has been Italian.
That's great.
Yeah.
Um,
It's awesome. We only have 3.5 minutes left. So I guess as like a final question, I would say, what of your many accomplishments in your career, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Well, there are two ways to answer that. The most publicly proud I am, of course, is of the transportation system, in that I chaired the Transportation Committee of the Board of Supervisors for 20 years, was able to start from nothing, develop the master plan, and chair the tax measures and so on, and develop the master plan to the point now where we have a downtown station, which, by the way, is named after me.
Yeah.
It's the Diridon Station,
mhm.
and that's what you see behind me there in the picture. And with ultimately, we'll have high-speed rail, BART, uh, commuter rail from the Capital trains and the Altamont Express, uh, and Caltrain, a light rail line going directly under it with a station under it, and dozens of bus lines that interconnect there, and bikes and so on. And that's been master planned carefully by committees that I've chaired for the last 20 years. So I'm very, very proud of the transportation system. At the same time, I'm very, very proud of having chaired the Parks Department for those 20 years and expending the funding that I helped create in the park charter measure, which created uh, a dedicated portion of the county tax base that would only go to parks, couldn't be used for anything but parks. And we went from 500 acres to over 45,000 acres of parks in the 20 years that I was in office. And that's something for my grandbabies to enjoy for a long time in the future.
That's amazing. I mean, you have so much to be proud of, and everyone in the San Francisco Bay Area, I think, thanks you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it looks like we only have about a minute left, so we'll let you go, but thank you so much for meeting with both of us, Mr. Diridon.
Kelly, I am negligent in having shortened the time available, and I stand ready to be with you again anytime you'd like. And I'd
Great.
like to send to you some background material that has been prepared by, there's a group that thinks they're going to be writing a book about me. I don't think they're going to be, but they gathered a bunch of this, that, and the other thing. And if you'd like, I'll send it to you so you can look at it for background.
Yes,
That'd be
please
great.
do.
Yeah,
That would be
just
great.
send, yeah, to that
So
email
much.
You need
chain that we have.
photographs of any kind?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever you have would be great. Photographs would be great. Yeah,
Mhm.
like that would be awesome for the website.
Okay, Shea, I have your
Yeah,
email.
my email works fine. You can just send me there, and I'll distribute.
Okay, I don't want to be a sexist by not including Kelly.
That is okay.
All right. All
Thank
right.
you so
Well,
much.
thank you for your attention and for your nice preparation. And I'm my primary effort right now is to fight climate change. And I'm spending every moment of my time. That's where I was meeting at noon and so on, giving a speech on climate change and fighting it, so that you and yours will have a future. And
Thank you.